Hello and welcome to the very last stop of our election road trip. Our journey across France to explore voters' key concerns ahead of the upcoming presidential election. Today, we're leaving the French Caribbean and heading to Paris. So we've made it back to the French capital, the beating heart of the country's economy. Usually a bustling hub for culture and gastronomy, Paris was badly hit by the pandemic.
We don't have enough jobs, and when you have rent to pay and children to feed, it's not easy. And to be honest, the government isn't doing much to address that.
We saw a move to buy products made in France during the COVID crisis.
Nobody's able to say for certain if this crisis is a thing of the past. We are seeing that our clients are starting to come back.
Successive COVID lockdowns brought French cities to a standstill and kept millions of foreign tourists away. A closer look now at the economic legacy of COVID here in France.
France's GDP growth saw a spectacular rebound in 2021, soaring over 7%, a better-than-expected performance that makes up for the 8.3% drop at the height of the pandemic in 2020. The increase puts France at the top of the European economic charts. Unemployment levels are also encouraging, with close to 480,000 fewer job seekers this year. The proportion of Category A job seekers in the working population is down to 7.6%, the lowest since 2012. There are several explanations behind these figures: new hires delayed by the pandemic, an unemployment benefit reform, the sudden spike in apprenticeships, and the post-COVID Great Resignation, which saw thousands of people quitting their jobs in pursuit of a better life. But the top priority is purchasing power, badly hindered by inflation at 2.9% this January because of rising energy prices and their impact on production costs, fuel, and food prices. Purchasing power was one of the central concerns of the Yellow Vest movement and will be a crucial talking point for the candidates. In response, the government put in place shock absorbers, fuel vouchers, price controls, and inflation subsidies.
The vast majority of COVID restrictions have now been lifted in the French capital. But as to whether voters are still feeling the financial effects of the crisis, it depends who you ask.
I've been very negatively impacted by the economic crisis. There's less and less work around. We don't have enough jobs, and when you have rent to pay and children to feed, it's not easy. And to be honest, the government isn't doing much to address that.
I think that things are gradually getting better. I think people are keen to get back to normal life. People want to enjoy themselves again. And the state did do a fair amount to support the economy. Unemployment is also going down.
During this presidential election, we're not talking much about things like culture, the economy, even healthcare. And maybe we should be. Even students aren't talking about these things enough. And at the end of the day, the economy is a country's beating heart.
The health crisis was particularly catastrophic for France's hospitality sector. We're meeting Isabelle Alain-Tasson, operations director at luxury group Albar, whose five-star hotel in central Paris opened a fortnight before France's first COVID lockdown in 2020. Isabelle Alain-Tasson, your hotel had its grand opening right as the first COVID restrictions were being implemented here in France. What sort of impact did that have?
The consequences were drastic. It was dramatic. We had to furlough our staff, and that was incredibly frustrating for us because we'd been working on this project for 5 years. 5 years of hard work for our operations team, our building teams, our housekeeping teams, the hotel workers. We'd been setting everything up so that we'd be able to welcome our clientele with that famous French savoir-faire, with everything you hope to experience in a luxury hotel. It's very frustrating to not have welcomed those guests, to have missed out on the experience of seeing clients' excitement when they discover a new establishment.
The whole luxury hotel sector was extremely badly hit during the pandemic. How did you weather the storm?
The first thing we wanted to do was to help the community. We got in touch with hospitals here in Paris, and we decided to open our doors to the nursing staff that were keeping things going. We welcomed nurses from Brittany and also from the south of France, and actually there were some doctors. And then we had to quickly implement a COVID health protocol and a health certificate so that our workers, clients and the nurses and doctors could be safely welcomed and in the best possible conditions. We also put a lot of effort into coming up with workshops. We made sure our online presence was up to date, and we made sure that our staff were eligible for wage supplements from the state. We also did a lot of other things, including coming up with new types of offers for our clients.
Énormément d'autres choses comme faire découvrir d'autres offres, mise en place d'autres offres pour la clientèle.
To what extent did the state step in to help you stay afloat?
We received state help that paid for a part of our salary costs when our staff were on furlough, and we also got some help with our social security payments. We were given the option to borrow some money under a scheme called the PGE, a state-guaranteed loan, which meant increasing our debts. And we're going to have to pay this state-guaranteed loan back starting this year, 2022, and that's going to be very difficult with repayments scheduled over the next 6 years. But right now, a number of big hotel groups are in talks with the government to try to get that extended to 10 years. And I should also say that in 2021, we received a number of different state subsidies.
Would you say that things are now getting back to normal for luxury hotels like yours? Is the crisis now a thing of the past?
Nobody's able to say for certain if this crisis is a thing of the past. But we are seeing that our clients are starting to come back. When we opened our doors again in September 2021, we had an amazing response from French clients, but also from neighbouring countries. Lots of people from Italy, Spain, Germany, England and Portugal. But then with the arrival of the Omicron variant, we saw the number of bookings plummet. We had a huge number of cancellations. For hotels here in Paris, including our Maison Albart hotels, January and February were very difficult. But now, despite everything, reservations are on the up. I'd even say there's a lot of demand, corporate clients, but also from tourists. March is looking pretty good, and April and May are looking great too. So we're pretty positive, and we're going to stay positive, just like we always are.
Isabelle Alain-Tasson, thank you so much for answering our questions.
Je vous en prie, c'était un plaisir de vous recevoir.
The health crisis and the e-commerce boom that ensued were a death knell for many non-essential businesses. Those still standing have had to embrace change.
This was Paris in March 2020. Streets, boulevards and avenues were frozen in time, a city in lockdown. Shops were shuttered as the French government stepped in to cover losses and keep bankruptcies to the minimum. 2 years and several waves of contamination later, a return to normal is long overdue.
I would say business returned to areas outside the capital very well. Paris a little less so. It's suffering from the lack of tourists. There's still a big hole in our business. There are no Asian tourists, a few Americans, and very few from South America. We're really missing Asian customers.
For watch designer Alain Marique, online sales were a question of survival, promoting products manufactured in France.
We saw a move to buy products made in France during the COVID crisis. At the start, people were saying, we'll buy French. It may be a good first step towards saving the economy.
Tourist visits to Paris are still around 50% down on what they should be normally. The Wallenberg brothers, too, have had to rethink sales in their bag and accessories shop.
Bags for men sold less well during COVID. We focused more on our women's range than the men's.
Tourists accounted for half the shop's customers, so the brothers switched to digital communication, search engine optimization, and different influencers to keep the business going.
We've relied totally on this, especially abroad, where we had a real increase in orders, selling women's bags in the United States and in Europe. We did everything we could to increase sales on the internet, which went pretty well and which saved our lives.
Turnover has almost returned to 2019 levels. 70% of the sales are now on the internet, with even local residents preferring to buy online. The COVID-19 epidemic has accelerated a trend already underway. E-commerce now accounts for about 15% of purchases in France.
That brings us to the final episode of our election road trip, which means the first round of voting is now just days away. From all France 24 channels, English, French, Arabic and Spanish, thank you for joining us on what's been a rather epic journey around France.